This house is mine now. If you have any complaints, I'll divorce you. Despite my father having passed away not long ago, Kevin joyfully boasted about changing the property deed to his name. I felt dizzy hearing this. There's no way it's that easy to transfer the registration into his name. I wondered if Kevin was misunderstanding something. Well, I'm fine with a divorce. Won't you regret it? Apparently, Kevin hadn't expected me to readily agree. He responded with a puzzled, "You kidding me?" Kevin retorted with a face that seemed to be like, "Are you out of your mind?" I see. He won't regret it. Well then, I won't hold back. And don't come crying to me later. I secretly smirked at Kevin's ever so naive thinking. My name is Rachel Anderson. I'm 35 and work as a civil servant. I have a very sincere personality, and I always felt that being a civil servant was a fitting job for me. When I got the civil service position, my parents were thrilled. That's because my father always told me to aim for a stable job. While it's hard to say if a job will always be stable, for now, I feel pretty secure in my position. There was a reason my dad emphasized a stable career. After graduating from college, my father joined a startup. Back then, he was full of enthusiasm for his upcoming career and, eager to prove himself, dove into a company with just 10 employees. However, sustaining the business was not an easy task. The company he joined went bankrupt after just 2 years. While trying to find another job, my dad couldn't find a suitable one. That's when he decided to start his own business. My father, lacking in business know-how, began managing a restaurant and steadily grew its performance. As the number of locations increased, he employed many staff, and his days revolved around store sales and profits. Most of the locations were renovated vacant homes or owned properties, so there was no rent to pay. Therefore, the more customers came, the more profit was made, and he amassed assets worth several $million over 35 years. However, building such wealth was not without its hardships. The daily stress of managing a business took its toll on him. As the profits grew, so did the number of people attracted by the allure of money, which led to relationship troubles. There were even instances when employees embezzled money from the store. Building assets was no simple feat. Perhaps that's why he hoped that his daughter, me, wouldn't face the same hardships and would lead a comfortable life. I'm content with my job as a civil servant, a role that perfectly suits my personality. While I'm not wealthy, I lead a decent life without any hitches. I always thought a quiet life like this was ideal. I'm gonna be late tomorrow night, so don't worry about dinner for me. I can't count how many times Kevin, my husband, has said that to me. While I was doing the dishes after dinner, I dried my wet hands with a towel and turned to him, asking, "Again? Is there really that much overtime at the factory?" "It's the busy season, so we're swamped." Kevin works on the production line in a semiconductor factory. He started this job right after high school, and it's been 18 years now. Every single day, he processes components on the assembly line for 8 hours. It's tough work. I couldn't do it, but Kevin says it's easier than a job that requires a lot of thinking. Right. I've heard there's a shortage of laborers lately. Must be tough. Yeah, so I might be coming home late for a while. All right. Take care, okay? Lately, Kevin's been coming home late more frequently, and sometimes he doesn't return until the next day. I doubt he's working that late, so he probably grabs a drink somewhere after work. I can't fault him for wanting to relax with a drink after a long day, but it does feel like he's doing it quite often. However, I can't bring myself to confront Kevin about it. Considering his tiring job, I'm afraid that if I ask him not to drink so much, he might get angry. Fortunately, Kevin should be paying for the drinks from his pocket money, so it wasn't that big of a deal. After seeing Kevin go into the bedroom, I stretched my shoulders. Lately, my shoulders have been tense. I've been leading different lives from Kevin, and maybe I'm so stressed out mentally that it's affecting me physically. I tell myself not to overthink it too much. I met Kevin when I was in my junior year of high school. Kevin went to a nearby school and approached me during a school event. Although I was initially hesitant when this younger guy asked for my number, Kevin was so persistent that I eventually gave in. Being known just for my seriousness, I asked him why he approached me so much. Though it's embarrassing to say, he apparently liked my appearance and vibe. I always perceived Kevin as a bit of a playboy, so I was initially very skeptical. But I soon realized he was unexpectedly loyal and my feelings for him grew stronger. Even after high school graduation and Kevin getting a job, and me going to college and started working, Kevin remained my partner. We got married when I was 27. Unfortunately, we haven't been blessed with children since then. I think it's probably too late now. But I believe that life as a couple is good enough. If I can spend the rest of my life with him, who's remained the same over the years, that'd be just fine. Kevin probably feels the same way. Amidst our busy yet serene married life, I got a call. Hello? Hello, Rachel? Oh good, are you at work right now? Yeah. What's up? I was surprised to get a call from my mother in the middle of a workday. It must be something urgent. I asked her what had happened. Something terrible. Dad has fell ill. After some tests, they said he has colon cancer. Cancer? No way! I couldn't believe my ears when I heard cancer from my mother. No one in our family had ever had cancer. But given that my father is a busy businessman, he might have neglected regular health checkups. It wouldn't be strange if he got sick and didn't realize it. It's true. They said it's progressed quite a bit. No way. But isn't cancer treatable these days? Well, from what they're saying about Dad's condition, he might only have a few months left. A few months? That can't be. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding. But my father is only 60, still relatively young, and it's plausible that the cancer progressed quickly. And they discovered it late. Even with advancements in medicine, it's challenging to fully cure advanced cancer. My mother explained through her tears. I get it. I'm gonna head back home for a bit. I'll let Kevin know too. Thank you, Rachel. My father has always been very important to me. There was no question I had to be there for him in this crisis. Kevin would surely understand. That day, I returned home from work, feeling out of sorts. Surprisingly, Kevin was home early. Seeing my distraught face, he called out. What's wrong? Why the long face? Kevin was sipping a beer on the sofa. I told Kevin exactly what I had heard from my mother. And I also asked him if it was okay for me to go back to my parents' house for a while. That's rough. Okay, I get it. Stay with your father. Thanks. I won't be able to make dinner for a while. That's fine. Don't worry. I've been coming home late from work lately anyway. I'll grab something outside. Okay, but you gotta make sure to eat something nutritious now and then. I know. Kevin listened more calmly than I'd expected. I started preparing for my trip home the next day with relieved. When bedtime came, as I was about to enter the room, I heard Kevin talking from his bedroom. He was on the phone with someone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but I stopped in my tracks when I overheard him say, "It seems he's not gonna make it much longer. You remember what we talked about before? Can we sort that out somehow? Not much longer? Is he talking about my father? Yeah, oh, I see. Got it. Please do." I wasn't sure who he was asking for what, but at the very least, I could tell he was discussing something about my father. How could he talk like that? I've never heard Kevin speak ill of my father. It's not like they're best friends, but Kevin's not so cold-hearted as to not worry when my father's in danger. So, does Kevin not care about my father at all? Even though my father is in the advanced stages of cancer, he's still alive. Talking about my father's situation with a complete stranger? That's just wrong. That was the first time I ever felt suspicious of Kevin. After that, my doubts about Kevin never faded. Kevin was like, "Take care," cheerfully bid me goodbye when I was about to head to my parents' home. Yet, I couldn't shake off what I heard Kevin discussing over the phone. Kevin is up to something. The only thing involving my father that comes to mind is money. I haven't told Kevin about the extent of my father's assets. I always thought discussing money might cause some troubles. It's something we could discuss if and when inheritance becomes an issue. But now's not the time. It's not like I was hiding it, but I never felt the need to bring it up. But what if Kevin knows about my father's assets? What if Kevin's after that money? No, I've got to stop overthinking. Pushing away those negative thoughts, I took care of my father and enjoyed our small talks. Thank you, Rachel. And you, Mom. I'm a lucky man. Don't be so formal. You don't have to say that. That's right. It's too soon for thank yous. As my mother and I tried to lighten the mood with laughter, only my father sat there, squinting his eyes, smiling with acceptance. That final chapter with my father came to a close 3 months later. The departure was so sudden, neither my mother nor I was mentally prepared. Even during the funeral, I was spaced out, unable to come to terms with the fact that my father was no longer with us. On the other hand, Kevin seemed lively, like a fish in water, and I couldn't help but feel suspicious. My heart finally settled down about a week after the funeral. I was drinking alone in the living room when Kevin came in. "Glad that hassle is over," he said, crossing his arms behind his head and looking at me coldly. "Hassle? Yeah, I was hoping my father-in-law would kick the bucket sooner, but when he did, all this funeral stuff was a real pain." "Hey! You can't talk like that. A person died, and that person was my dad. How can you say something like that?" Taken aback by Kevin's unbelievable words, I leaned in and snapped back. I knew it. Kevin had been hoping for my father's early passing. I remembered him talking about my father on the phone with someone before. What on earth is Kevin's motive? "So, when do we get the inheritance? I heard that your family is super rich, and there's a lot of inheritance, right?" It was then that I realized Kevin's intention. I never imagined that Kevin was after my father's assets. After all, I had never discussed my family's finances with Kevin. But, it seemed Kevin noticed that my dad had considerable assets. "You look surprised." Of course, I knew. My family was always dirt poor. It was a struggle just to get 3 meals a day. Compared to that, your family seemed well off and your parents traveled often. That alone made it clear to me that you folks were loaded. That's why I discussed it in advance. Discussed? With whom? Kevin nonchalantly explained how he deduced my family's financial situation, and he indeed mentioned discussing it with someone. I remembered Kevin talking on the phone in our bedroom. I wondered if by consultation he meant that time I recalled him on the phone. "I've got a friend who's a paralegal. I asked him about your dad's inheritance. We're definitely getting a good chunk of it." Seriously? The fact that he discussed my father's inheritance with a stranger, especially while my father was still alive, was unbelievable. I began to doubt whether the man standing before me was really my husband. He'll get back to me soon. So, look forward to it. With that, Kevin headed back to the bedroom. He's probably gonna contact that friend again. I was dumbfounded by Kevin's outrageous actions. I mean, who goes around investigating their wife's family's inheritance without telling them? The inheritance was a matter concerning my family, and Kevin had no business interfering. Distrustful of Kevin's actions and words, I found myself unable to speak to him. We lived in a Cold War-like silence for a while, but things took a sudden turn a month later. Putting aside the fact that Kevin talked about the inheritance, my father's assets were rightfully passed down to my mother and me. I inherited a $2 million mansion from my father, and it felt overwhelming. I don't plan to move into the inherited house right away, but it's too good a mansion to let sit empty. As I was agonizing over whether to use it as a vacation home or sell it, Kevin spoke to me after a long silence. "Hey, Rachel. How have you been? How ironic, asking if I'm well when we live in the same place. Ignoring his comment, I picked up a nearby book. Don't ignore me. I had the deed to the property you inherited changed to my name, he grinned. Shocked by what I heard, I looked up from the book I was about to read.
What are you talking about?
I had it sorted with that paralegal guy I mentioned before.
You mean the registration's changed?
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't believe it. It was outrageous that he'd done such a thing without telling me, and the guy who agreed to help him, it was out of line. The house is mine now. If you have any complaints, let's just divorce. Despite my father's recent passing, Kevin brazenly bragged about changing the deed of the house to his name, leaving me feeling dizzy. It can't be that easy to change the registration. I thought Kevin might have gotten something wrong. I was torn about whether to confront Kevin about it. I was downright furious with him and couldn't easily forgive what he'd done. So, instead of confronting him right away, I wanted to devise a plan to get back at him. Well, I'm fine with a divorce, but won't you regret it? Kevin, probably not expecting me to agree so easily. He was like, "What?" in a bewildered voice. You kidding me? Kevin replied with a look that seemed to be like, "Are you nuts?" I see. No regrets? Well, if that's the case, I won't hold back. Just know I won't be there for him when he comes crying later. I smirked inside at Kevin's naive thinking. After that, I started investigating everything about Kevin's life. First, I took some paid time off and, while Kevin was at work, thoroughly searched his room. Kevin's messy room was terribly dirty, with stuff scattered all over the floor. From among them, I picked up a particular item. I discreetly slipped it into my pocket. Then, I fiddled with the computer on Kevin's desk and opened his messaging app. This must be the paralegal he's been talking about. The conversation with a person named John Miller was truly terrible. It was mostly about money. And not just money, but discussing shady schemes to make illicit gains. I sighed in disbelief. It was pitiable to see Kevin getting manipulated by such a person. Afterwards, I left the room and headed to a specific location. After repeated painstaking tasks, I uncovered about Kevin's dirty dealings. The more I investigated, the more I realized I had been living with such a person, and it sent chills down my spine. Once I had finished investigating Kevin, and my feelings for him had completely cooled, I decided to proceed with our divorce. It was easy to proceed since Kevin had brought up the divorce. I just had to contact a lawyer who assists the process. After a while, our documentation were in progress, and Kevin and I were officially in divorced process. It was an unexpected end to our marriage, but after the way Kevin disrespected my father, there was no love left for him. The Kevin I once knew was gone. My investigations revealed he was a real piece of work. The house I spent with Kevin became no longer mine. Because this house was originally under Kevin's name, and he had taken out a mortgage for it. I thought it was right for me to leave here, but Kevin never came home after that day. He's probably living in the mansion I inherited. I wonder if he's enjoying life now. But who knows how long that'll last. I was very calmly thinking about Kevin's situation. And then, days later, Kevin finally appeared before me. "Rachel, we've already proceeded with the divorce, haven't we?" He asked anxiously as soon as he stepped in from the front door. I was like, why such an abrupt question, to Kevin's unexpected return and forward question. "So, we're divorcing now." Kevin raised his voice. He seems to be in a pretty tight spot. "Yes, I contacted the lawyer a few days ago." "So, we're going to be strangers to each other."
What?
Despair spread across Kevin's face. Kevin was the one who asked for the divorce, so I wish he wouldn't look at me as if I'm the one at fault.
Why'd you do something so selfish?
You're the one who said we should get divorced, right? Why the fuss now? Faced with my reasoning, Kevin was momentarily silenced. I had an idea why Kevin was suddenly blaming the divorce on me.
Rachel, please, get back together with me. If not, I'm gonna.
Kevin sank to the floor, head bowed. With a sympathetic look, I asked, "Oh, what happened? Something wrong?" I had a pretty good idea what had happened, but I decided to play dumb and ask anyway.
Some debt collectors came to me, and I tried to call Miller. But it seems he changed his number, and he's not reading my emails. He deceived me.
Miller is that so-called paralegal. Kevin's story was fragmented, but I had a rough idea of what was going on. When I had checked Kevin's room, I could deduce what he'd been up to. "You've been gambling all this while." "I found plenty of betting slips and receipts from the casino. I even checked your visits to the nearby poker room. Seems you've been at it for about a year now. That's why you ran out of money, right? When I checked our joint account, I noticed small withdrawals that I didn't recognize. Turns out you were dipping into our savings. And then you got conned by that paralegal." Right. Kevin, who was always careless with money, had been secretly indulging in gambling behind my back. When I noticed he was coming home late recently, I initially thought he was out drinking. But it turned out he was gambling. So, when my father passed away and discussions started about me inheriting his properties, Kevin must have seen it as an opportunity. He'd been consulting with a guy named Miller, claiming to be a legal consultant, on how he could inherit the assets himself.
What? It was my bad about gambling, but I got duped by that guy too. The mansion Rachel inherited hasn't become mine. I'm gonna go bankrupt at this rate. Don't you think that's sad? So, help me out, will ya?
He'd sometimes suggest we divorce, and other times pester me to make amends. Seeing Kevin in this pathetic state made me more bewildered than angry. Had he forgotten that he once wished for my father's death and disrespected him? I couldn't even see him as my ex-partner anymore.
Excuse me? You're to blame here, aren't you? Feeling sorry for yourself? It's because you let your guard down that you got scammed in the first place. The assets I inherited from my dad are what we'd call separate property here. They're not subject to distribution, and you can't just change the ownership like that. But you got easily fooled by this Miller guy and come crying to me. How convenient for you, huh? Just know, I'll never forgive you for this." As I sternly said that, I could see fear in Kevin's eyes. I brushed past Kevin, heading to the front door. "I'll be moving to the mansion I got from my dad. You can stay in this house. Remember, there's a mortgage to pay. Good luck with that." "Hold on." Ignoring the desperate man calling out from behind, I walked away confidently. A week later, I received a call on my cell. It was Kevin's mother. I hesitated, thinking she would blame me for the divorce. But it was the opposite. "Oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry. Kevin has done something awful. I'm at a loss for how to apologize." "You don't have to." "No, I can't stand it. He's coming to me for help to pay his debts off. I'm just flabbergasted. I gave him a good talking that he'd better be prepared. He won't be gambling again anytime soon. It'd do him good to learn the value of money. I'll make sure he takes care of both his job and home by himself." Kevin's mother was furious with his actions and made it clear she planned to give him a hard time. I couldn't help but smirk, thinking how he'd cope. It was his punishment for disrespecting my father and trying to deceive me. I didn't feel sorry for him in the slightest. He should focus on paying those debts off. As for me, I did as I said and moved to the mansion I inherited. It came furnished, so I didn't need to buy much. I had to purchase a few personal items I'd left behind, but the thought of my new, free life excited me. The new house was really spacious, almost $2,000 for just one person to live in. Right now, I'm not keen on the idea of marriage, but if time passes and I happen to meet someone special again, I'd invite them over to this house. They'd probably be so surprised they might just drop their jaw. The thought of my future partner's reaction brought a smile to my face. "Thank you, Dad." Grateful to my father for leaving such a wonderful estate, I embarked on my new journey.